Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana News Desk. The city has evicted a homeless encampment on Bloomington's west side. It's the second encampment cleared under new mayor Kerry Thomson.
This really was an urgent situation, and we needed to move as quickly as possible.
2 people have been killed at the encampment in the last 6 weeks. Parents say Monroe County Schools' proposal to merge Childs and Templeton elementary schools is just one more disruption for pandemic-scarred students.
The kids who will be impacted by this proposed school change are the ones that did not receive preschool, did kindergarten on the iPad, had to sit 3 feet apart and face forward during school days.
MCCSC says the merger is an effort to balance socioeconomic status levels among schools. And we take a look at some bills making their way through the Statehouse. We'll have these stories plus the latest news from across the state right now on Indiana News Desk. Welcome to Indiana News Desk. I'm Joe Wren. The city of Bloomington cleared a homeless camp for the second time since Mayor Kerry Thomson took office at the beginning of the year. The camp raised Thursday had been the site of 2 killings in the past 6 weeks. Lucas Gonzalez has this report.
Social workers, police, and other city staff gathered at a wooded area behind the Wheeler Mission on the city's west side Thursday to clear people's belongings. Thomson was there and says the city waited to clear the camp because of recent weather, even though a trespass notice was posted a week ago.
Today was really the first day without the cold and the rain that we could assist in moving things without ruining them.
Thomson also appeared in person when the city vacated another camp on the city's southwest side earlier this month. Thomson says this camp was cleared because of 2 recent homicides there. Earlier this month, a man was shot to death, and in December, a man was killed with a machete.
This really was an urgent situation, and after that second murder, service providers and our departments really felt like we needed to move as quickly as possible.
People at the camp were given 72 hours to move or face arrest and have their belongings seized. The last time the city cleared a camp, people were given 48 hours notice. Thomson says the city gave more advance notice this time based on conversations with local service providers.
People need adequate notice in order to take care of their belongings and start moving them. And so we're committed to giving as much notice as we can.
By Thursday morning, only a handful of people who had been staying at the camp were still there. Several battered tents remained scattered in various parts of the area, along with trash bags, empty cans and bottles, shopping carts, tires, and other stray items. Thomson says she spoke to at least 3 people at the camp, and one found another place to stay, while 2 others were not sure where they were going.
We need to be at a place where we can say to everybody who is from Bloomington, we can offer you a place with a roof over your head and services so that your health needs can be met.
Thomson says the city had done outreach work at the camp for several months, which involved helping people keep their living areas tidy, checking on their well-being, helping connect them with service providers, and helping them find another place to go. The city offers storage space for people staying at a camp to keep their belongings in whenever a camp is cleared. Thomson says this is part of her approach to addressing homelessness, with dignity, compassion, and safety. She also says she has met with service providers and representatives of the local faith community to discuss possible solutions. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Lucas Gonzalez.
The Monroe County Community School Corporation is advancing a proposal to merge 2 of its elementary schools. The district says it's part of an effort to balance the socioeconomic status levels of schools, but some parents say it's a Band-Aid and not a solution to the problem. Benta Boutier explains what's next in the process and how community members can give input.
Traveling down East Hillside and High Street, Templeton and Childs elementary schools are less than 10 minutes apart by car and 11 by bike. If the superintendent's proposal goes forward, the 2 schools could merge, Childs hosting pre-K through 2nd grade and Templeton grades 3 through 6. Parents spoke to the school board for more than an hour at its meeting Tuesday night over concerns about the merger. Katie King has kids in Templeton's multi-age program. Since the pandemic, this is the first school year that's felt normal to her, and the merger would cause further disruption.
The kids who will be impacted by this proposed school change are the ones that did not receive preschool, did kindergarten on the iPad, had to sit 3 feet apart and face forward during school days, and could not be rough and tumble on the playground.
The merger is part of an effort to balance socioeconomic status levels among schools in the district. King says the district needs to address disparities but wants long-term solutions and a concrete plan.
Even just the basics of logistics and transportation, what that would mean. I also feel pretty strongly about the benefit of a K through 6 school and the power of that and the role modeling of that.
The school corporation measured socioeconomic disparities by using rates of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch at its 14 elementary schools. Childs has one of the lowest rates at 15% of students qualifying. Templeton has one of the higher rates at 64%. In December, the board also heard a proposal to combine University and Fairview schools. It scrapped that merger idea Tuesday after parent feedback at the meeting concerning transportation and an ongoing transition of the district's advanced learning program to Fairview. Jason Winters attended Tuesday's meeting. He says the board's actions don't feel transparent.
I'd like to know whether we've looked at all of the reasonable methods for balancing SES, including redistricting. I'd like to know if this is the best method that we've identified and what we've done to identify that this is indeed the best method.
He says the district does need to address equity but wants them to have outlined goals and expected outcomes, which would be required in a redistricting process.
They don't really have a great plan for understanding what outcomes they're actually going to measure, how they're going to measure those. They're basing everything on SES.
Some parents at Tuesday's meeting said school redistricting would be a more effective strategy for balancing socioeconomic status. April Hennessy says mergers and redistricting are not mutually exclusive and that redistricting can take a long time.
Some of the reasons why we're moving forward with smaller scale mergers and things like that is because you can create integration by merging schools, and while it might not be ideal, the prospect of redistricting in a community that has often been resistant to that is difficult.
Brendan Schur says gathering support for redistricting has been a challenge in the past and feels hesitant that it's coming up now when there is a proposed change.
And I'm excited that everyone's excited for redistricting, but I'm a little bit leery that support's not actually there. It's to distract from maybe the change that we are talking about possibly making.
King, a clinical social worker, says she's glad the board is receptive to redistricting and doesn't think the merger will fix district-wide issues.
One thing that I feel hopeful about is the community conversation, and so I love that they were talking about having meetings at each of the schools to get more of the parents involved.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Benta Boutier.
The board plans to gather more information on school mergers and redistricting and will address both at its March meeting. The Environmental Protection Agency approved a permit for construction on a controversial project to store carbon emissions underground in Vigo and Vermilion counties. The permit will allow Wabash Valley Resources to make low-carbon fertilizer, which it says would open up Indiana corn growers to new markets that require more climate-friendly practices. But more than 1,000 residents have come out against the project. Among other things, they're concerned about the potential for pipeline leaks and earthquakes, and that the CO2 could migrate. Wabash Valley Resources can now secure financing for the project and start drilling the injection wells, but the company can't actually start storing CO2 until the EPA inspects those wells. The company hopes to accomplish all of that this year. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk.
The Kinsey Institute is hosting listening sessions about its future on the IU campus after the state cut its funding. And Bloomington unveiled a new design for a landmark at Miller Showers Park after public outcry forced the city to abandon its original plans.
These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Thank you, sister. Thank you for my daughter.
These are your ancestors.
I am forever changed.
Really? It's crazy.
Makes me happier than I can say.
I have a little girl, Iris.
Turn the page, meet your DNA cousin.
Oh no!
The Black preaching tradition is deeply connected to gospel music. Our singers preach and our preachers sing.
God, we ask that you reinvigorate somebody.
You feel it deep down in your soul. It makes you want to shout. It makes you want to sing.
That's beautiful.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. It's been a busy week at the Statehouse as lawmakers work on a number of bills. Several have passed the House and are awaiting to be heard in the Senate. And lawmakers want to tackle high health care costs by targeting monopolies through a notification process with the Attorney General's office. Proposed legislation would require hospitals to notify the Attorney General for an antitrust review if an acquisition or consolidation exceeds $10 million. The Indiana Hospital Association opposes the bill, saying it would duplicate federal efforts. Despite those objections, the bill passed unanimously. A bill that would further reduce protections for wetlands in Indiana passed the State House this week. It would lower the number of wetlands that could fall into Class 3, Indiana's most protected group of wetlands, and the only class that didn't lose significant protections when the state changed its wetlands law in 2021. It would also provide incentives to developers to protect some wetlands. Now, proponents say it strikes a good compromise between builders and the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, but some call the bill a missed opportunity.
To really look at what is driving this, this conflict between those who want to develop our land and those who want to protect it.
Arrington says the bill doesn't address what most of the developers' complaints have been about Indiana's confusing wetland classification system. She authored an amendment that aimed to simplify wetland classification by aligning it with that of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, but that amendment failed. A bill making its way through the State House aims to make more land available for housing in Monroe County by allowing developers to build on steeper slopes. The legislation would increase the maximum slope from 15% to 25%. There's an exemption for land that drains into drinking water reservoirs like Lake Monroe. Still, Monroe County stormwater and planning experts say allowing development on steeper slopes could send sediment pollution into underground streams that resurface in other areas. Bloomington Representative Matt Pierce says the watershed needs stronger protections, and this bill takes that out of the hands of local officials. Sexual violence survivors are pushing for legislation that would eliminate the statute of limitations for all sex crimes. Prosecuting most sex crimes in Indiana generally has to happen within 5 years of the crime being committed. If it's a crime against a child, the statute of limitations runs until the victim turns 31.
We must allow victims the time to care for themselves in order to address trauma that they endured. To expect a child at 13 years old to navigate the justice system is just cruel.
A Senate committee is expected to vote on the bill next week, and the measure will likely change. A House bill would put cameras in some areas of schools where kids are put in seclusion and timeout. Supporters of the bill say cameras are necessary to protect both students and staff, particularly children who are unable to communicate. But school administrators worry about the cost of cameras and the video storage fees. A bill that would change the definition of toxic PFAS to exclude chemicals Indiana manufacturers want to continue using passed the House this week. PFAS are used to make a variety of nonstick, waterproof, and stain-resistant products, but exposure to the chemicals has been linked to kidney cancer, problems within the immune system, and developmental issues in children. Critics of the bill say changing the definition allows non-essential items to continue to make people sick. State lawmaker says cars and their technology are improving, so it's time to consider increasing the speed limits on rural highways and interstates to 75 miles per hour.
We have sensors. The steering is so much tighter. The cars are so much better. The engineering is so much better.
Schmaltz called his bill just the start of a conversation that could last until next session. The State Department of Transportation testified against the bill, noting that average speeds have increased every year since 2018. A lot of Statehouse stuff. Thanks for hanging in there, Callie. Your turn. How about some headlines?
I'm glad to get to it, Joe. Some Bloomington City Hall tenants do not want to move early to make way for a proposed police department headquarters. City officials told the Bloomington Redevelopment Commission 8 of the 14 tenants in Showers West are willing to end their leases early, but the remaining 6 are not. Negotiations with those tenants are ongoing.
To the extent that we need that square footage for some public purpose, we want to work with them to try to, negotiate so that it's mutually beneficial.
Rice says the city knew about the tenants' wishes since last year when John Hamilton was mayor. The Showers West project started under Hamilton and is being reviewed by Mayor Kerry Thomson. City Attorney Larry Allen says Thomson is examining the project and plans to use the space for a public purpose, even if she takes the project in a different direction.
That has not been finalized yet in terms of what that will look like. Staff is still evaluating that. The mayor's office is still evaluating that, so there will be more considerations.
In the meantime, the city says it will move forward with early lease terminations for the tenants willing to move. A federal grand jury has indicted 3 former administrators from troubled virtual schools for an alleged scheme to defraud Indiana. Indiana funds schools based on enrollment, and the officials are accused of lying about how many students went to the schools. The indictment says officials at Indiana Virtual Pathways Academy and Indiana Virtual School knew that many of the students they reported to the state were not actually enrolled. As a result of the scheme, the virtual schools received more than $44 million they weren't entitled to. Many people who attended a recent listening session about the future of the Kinsey Institute say they're frustrated by what they call a lack of support from the university. Indiana lawmakers voted last spring to block state funds from the institute, which studies human sexuality, gender, and relationships. IU administrators then announced a plan to separate the institute from the university. The listening sessions are meant to gather input from Kinsey stakeholders, and as Ethan Sandweiss reports, people have a lot of questions.
The university is looking to maintain compliance with the law, ideally while satisfying Kinsey stakeholders. Justin Garcia, director of the Kinsey Institute, acknowledged the anxiety and fear experienced by many of those who attended.
It's an unprecedented situation. The faculty and staff and students at the Institute have suffered indescribable harassment.
The listening sessions are meant to gather input from stakeholders, but many attendees had unanswered questions. History professor Judith Allen pressed Vice Provost for Finance Amy Heater on whether the working group had been given an explanation for the university's original plan to separate from the institute.
Has anybody in your vicinity articulated a good reason for it that makes any sense?
Again, I understand where you're coming from, but our goal today is to work through. I'm not poised to have it. I do not have an answer on that one today.
Okay, so you haven't heard anyone.
Some Kinsey researchers and staff also said they feel unsafe as misinformation about Kinsey spreads.
It should not fall upon my lab manager to be the person to greet some violent, angry person who shows up
because they're believing some untruths that have been said about what's happening at our institute.
University President Pamela Whitten has said she supports Kinsey's mission and research, but faculty want the university to deny publicly rumors that Kinsey staff support or enable child abuse. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
The working group's report will be presented to the IU trustees and university administrators next month. A 5-year digital equity plan that will serve as a roadmap to help increase Hoosier access to high-speed internet was unveiled this week. Clayton Baumgarth reports on who still doesn't have access to broadband and plans to get it to them.
According to the report, 24.7% of Indiana households do not have home internet access or rely solely on mobile internet. Purdue VP for Engagement Roberto Gallardo says the team was most surprised by data on who has home paid internet access.
We found that a higher share, actually a lower share of whites subscribed to paid home internet over the past 12 months compared to minorities. We were not expecting that finding.
Another noteworthy finding, the top reason for not paying for home internet over the last year was the cost of desktops and laptops, followed closely by the cost of the service itself. Gallardo says this plan parallels the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, the $42.45 billion U.S. Government of Commerce infrastructure plan bringing internet to rural areas.
Digital equity looks at specific groups, which are called covered populations, to ensure that they have access to broadband devices and skills to make sure they can participate in the online economy.
The plan includes just over 80 objectives to complete the plan's main goals, such as providing residents with connectivity and devices that are affordable, accessible, reliable, and equitable. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
After a 30-day public comment period ends, the federal government will publish guidelines on funds that can be used to implement the plan. A commercial turkey farm in Daviess County has tested positive for avian flu. The flock of over 13,000 birds is under quarantine and marks the first outbreak in a commercial flock in Indiana in more than a year. It's the same disease that has been affecting commercial and hobby birds since early 2022. But state officials say it doesn't pose a food safety risk.
Folks don't have to worry about their eggs or their chicken or any of their poultry meat at the grocery store, because before any of that goes to processing to get packaged to the store, all of those flocks get tested and only healthy birds go in our food supply.
The state has set up a 6-mile control area that includes 45 commercial flocks and 48 hobby and backyard flocks, and a 12-mile surveillance zone that includes portions of Daviess, Martin, and Greene counties. The city of Bloomington says it's getting closer to finalizing a new design concept for a gateway landmark in Miller Showers Park. It's still working with the design it first revealed in November, horizontally stacked limestone with letters on the side spelling out the word Bloomington. The city now says the design will include an art installation, but details such as cost, design, and dimension won't be determined until the Bloomington Arts Commission solicits design proposals and selects a concept.
We are not going to determine what specifically that piece of public art is. That will be to the Bloomington Arts Commission, and I'm excited to work with them on this in their full capacity.
Street says the new design implements feedback from residents who criticized the landmark's original design, a 40-foot tall aluminum monolith. The city abandoned the design after public outcry. Street says the art installation and additional work needed will be paid through bicentennial bonds approved in 2018. About $1.25 million was set aside for the project. Indiana gets a failing grade in nearly every category for its tobacco prevention efforts. The report from the American Lung Association looks at how well states are preventing youth from using tobacco and helping adults quit. The Lung Association was critical of the state's tobacco taxes, which haven't gone up in more than 15 years, and the lack of money the state invests in prevention programs. The State Commission of Higher Education plans to research what factors are contributing to Indiana's poor college enrollment. Indiana ranks 31st in the nation in the college-going rate for high school students. The commission wants Indiana to become a top 10 state in post-high school training and education by 2030. The research findings will inform the commission's strategic plan and 2025 legislative priorities. The Brown County Music Center is donating more than $250,000 to the Brown County government and the Brown County Community Foundation. The donation marks the first time the music venue has been able to donate its excess profits, as was originally intended when the venue was built in 2019.
to be able to do this, and it's such a large number. Again, completely proud and honored to be a part of it, and frankly, it's going to be the first of many.
The center was closed for 650 days due to the COVID pandemic and wasn't profitable in 2022. The Community Foundation gets 75% of the money and will split it between a long-term endowment and scholarship awards or community projects. And Joe, county commissioners can use their 25% share on whatever projects they prioritize, things such as road resurfacing or sewer system improvements.
Okay, thank you so much, Kelly. Don't go anywhere. Hang on a second. Do you hear that sound? It's cicadas. Two different broods will emerge simultaneously this spring for the first time since 1803. One that lives on a 13-year cycle and one that lives on a 17-year cycle. Bloomington and surrounding areas are safe from these noisy insects, but southern parts of the state will see them as well as some of Indiana's northern counties that are closer to Lake Michigan. The emergences will not be synced up again for another 221 years. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard-Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.